Good afternoon. This is the Thursday edition of E&E Weekly. I am Joycelyn Elakeche Ada. Our top stories for today: hike in electricity tariff and fuel price pushing the country towards a major protest by organized labor. The federal government to spend 250 billion naira on its gas for fuel program nationwide. And oil prices mixed in early trade today, just clinging to overnight gains as concerns about weak fuel demand emerges again. And Nigeria to create 7.5 trillion solar energy market to raise the potential for solar energy component manufacturing and distribution nationwide. These stories and more after this short break. Welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. Negotiations have failed between government and organized labor over threats of strike following hike in electricity tariff and fuel price. The Minister of Labor and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, and the Trade Union Congress disagreed over a plan by the TUC to go on strike as from September 23rd, following a 7-day ultimatum. The Nigerian Labour Congress issued its own 2-week ultimatum yesterday to mobilize for a nationwide strike action with effect from September the 28th of this month. The minister, while answering questions from State House correspondents at the end of the weekly meeting at the Federal Executive Council at the Presidential Villa yesterday, dismissed the 7-day ultimatum given the federal government to reverse the price of fuel. He stated that the letter written by the TUC should have been addressed to him instead of President Muhammadu Buhari. But the TUC president, Mr. Quadri Olaleye, said the issue of petrol price was beyond the minister. The Nigerian Labour Congress issued its own 2-week ultimatum to government yesterday after a meeting of Central Working Committee. The NLC president, Mr. Ayuba Waba, said the NLC would mobilize its members nationwide for protest as from September the 28th. An NLC president said that the National Executive Council committee members and the state chapters as well as affiliates would meet on September the 22nd to decide on the strike action if the government failed to revert the decisions. And moving on PPPRA, the Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Agency has now officially unveiled a gazetted market-based pricing regime for petrol. The new gazette normally empowers all marketers to fix petrol price in accordance with market realities. According to spokesperson of the agency, Kimchi Apollo, the gazette on pricing regime for petrol was issued in March 2020. It would be recalled that the PPPRA had in March this year declared that petrol price would be determined by the forces of demand and supply. But the new gazette, which supports that stand, stated that the price of crude oil in the international market would to a large extent determine the cost of petrol domestically. The Executive Secretary, PPPRA, Abdulkadir Saidu, claimed that the agency would continue to ensure that the downstream oil sector was deregulated in a way that both oil marketers and consumers of petrol enjoy the benefit of deregulation. While the NNPC has reportedly extended its contracts with private companies to swap crude oil for fuels for another 6 months. The initial one-year contracts to exchange more than 300,000 barrels per day with 15 company pairings were due to expire next month. Reuters News reported that the companies renegotiated the price agreement due to changes to fuel prices in the country. There has been no statement or confirmation from the NNPC on this development, and there are no details on the terms of the agreement. The report, however, added that the contracts would supply a large portion of Nigeria's fuel and some of its diesel and jet fuel, as it has not been profitable for private importers to bring in fuel. We'll take a short break. When we return, the federal government to spend 250 billion naira on its gas for fuel program nationwide. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to E&E Weekly. The federal government is to spend 250 billion naira on its intervention facility for the National Gas Expansion Program. The program is targeted at making compressed natural gas, known as CNG, the fuel of choice for transportation, and liquefied petroleum gas, known as LPG, for domestic cooking, captive power, and small industrial complexes. To this end, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has capped the maximum loan an obligor can access under its 250,000 billion naira intervention fund for the gas sector at 10 billion naira. The Apex Bank disclosed this in a guideline titled Framework for the Implementation of Intervention Facility for the National Gas Expansion Program. There is a growing support from private sector as the Depot and Petroleum Product Marketers Association of Nigeria, known as DAPMAN, has expressed optimism that the full deregulation of the downstream sector will aid the growth of ancillary industries in the sector. According to the CBN, the fund was established to stimulate investment in the gas value chain and deepen growth in the sector. The Apex Bank said the weak investment in the sector had resulted in minimal production and utilization of CNG and LPG as clean alternative sources of domestic energy in Nigeria. It also added that failure to harness the nation's gas resources has negatively affected its productivity, fiscal and social, environmental and economic opportunities. And on the foreign scene, oil prices were mixed early trade today, just clinging to overnight gains following concerns about weak fuel demand. The U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were flat at $40.16 a barrel after jumping 4.9% on Wednesday. Brent crude futures gained 5 cents or 1% to $42.27 a barrel after climbing to 4.2% on Wednesday. Prices were mostly in negative ground in early trade after a bigger than expected rise in U.S. distillate stockpiles, which include diesel and heating oil, raised the alarm about fuel demand in the world's biggest economy. Distillate stockpiles rose by 3.5 million barrels last week. U.S. Energy Information Administration data showed on Wednesday that nearly 6 times more than analysts had expected. A panel of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies, known as OPEC Plus, meets today, to the 17th, to review the market, but it's unlikely to recommend further cuts to oil output despite the recent price drop, sources had told Reuters. OPEC Plus agreed in July to cut output by 7.7 million barrels per day, or around 8% of global demand, from August through to December. Iraq and others agreed to pump below their quotas in September to compensate for overproduction earlier this year. The price of OPEC basket of 13 crude stood at $39.35 a barrel on Tuesday, compared with the $38.96 the previous day, which was Monday. According to OPEC Secretariat calculations, the OPEC reference basket of crudes is made up of the following Saharan blend: Algeria, which is Girasol; Angola, which is Renault; Congo, Safiro; Equatorial Guinea is known as Rabi Light; Gabon, Iran Heavy; Islamic Republic of Iran is known as Basra Light; Iraq, Kuwait Export, and Is-Sida. Libya is known as Boni Light; Nigeria, Arab Light; Saudi Arabia, Moben, and UAE and Mari, Venezuela. Let's now take a look at the global oil OPEC market prices for today. We'll now take a short break from energy, and we'll be going to the environmental matters after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to E&E Weekly. If you're just joining us, we are on environmental issues. In the studio today with us, we have our town planner, Luca Bulus Archie. This is following recent floodings and efforts at tree planting campaigns within the FCT. The pioneer director of Parks and Recreation in the territory, and he's also the immediate past president of the Nigeria Institute of Town Planners. He is known as Town Planner Luca Bulus Archie. He is here to join us on discussion on environment issues in the FCT. You're welcome, Town Planner Archie.
Thank you very much.
You would permit me to call you that, Town Planner Archie. Sure. You're welcome to E&E Weekly.
Thank you very much.
So let's quickly start with this. We know that Lagos is usually attributed, the flood in Lagos is usually attributed to blocked sewages and all that. And we are now witnessing so much flood in the FCT. Would we also attribute the flood we're witnessing here to blocked sewages?
No, not exactly the same. In the FCT, I think there are other issues that are accounting for it, including the fact that people are building places where they are not supposed to build, which is very close to the riverbanks. There's supposed to be clearance away from where the water courses are, and therefore it's expected that people would have followed the normal design requirement. Unfortunately, the settlements that are most affected you will discover are those that don't have approval from government, because people simply picked spaces and started developing irrespective of the regulations. And then others who had no patience to wait on government to give them clearance and went ahead. Or even those who dare nature by expanding beyond the areas they were allowed. That's one part. And then, of course, the removal of the vegetation that also helps in retaining the water and acts like an edge, a hedge. But people do a lot of clearing with the expectation that they want to construct. But forget that you have to blend your environment along with your own construction. And I think we also have the issue of the pressure from the population. There are more people than were expected, and the farming activities have also further eroded the spaces that would have otherwise retained part of the water that was or that has been released from the upper part of the city. And I think when you put those together, you now have this effect of flooding that is beginning to eat into the fabrics of the city. Yes,
but while these people are putting up these structures, because it's one of the reasons you have mentioned that has led to the flow that we're witnessing now. Yeah. While putting up these structures, the government agency in charge, why is it that they don't stop them until the structures are put up, and that's when demolition will begin?
Well, it's easy to blame the government. You are unable to come at so time, but don't forget how many staff can be employed at a time versus the rate of growth and uncontrolled growth. The ideal thing, of course, is that you prevent them as soon as they show signs of. But then we have discovered people are so relatively indisciplined that they dare the government by starting a project late Friday evening when staff have left, and by Sunday morning something is standing. Then we got another insight into the way they behave. Someone will start construction, and because he thinks he thinks he's so clever, he will go and buy red paint and then mark it and claim it is from development control. And when the officers pass by, okay, this one has been marked, and they forget it. Then after a while, they go back, clean it up, and continue building, suggesting that it has been cleared. All these illegalities and deception by our public, is one of the problems we face. But more significantly, in terms of a scale of 0 to 10, maybe 60% is attributed to the fact that the requirement of the staff requirement is in a short supply, and the equipment required to go around is also a contributing factor, and that has been further exacerbated by the way the people behave and prevent people from moving. And I think that should be looked at.
Okay, let's talk a little on tree planting.
Okay.
We know that the president has kicked off, the tree planting campaign, and we are all planting trees. But how do we, in your opinion, how do we let the people know? Because we know that tree planting is, practiced more in the rural areas. They use it for firewood and all of that. How do we let them know that when you cut one tree, you plant two? What strategy can we use?
Well, apart from sensitization, which is one of this program, and what this program is hoping to achieve, there is also the expectation that the zones or the communities that we have around, especially in the suburbs, they should note that any tree that you cut down, you should make sure that you replace it by 2 or 3. And through community action, through our traditional rulers and some of our traditional institutions of passing information across. Most of us are just being plainly stubborn. I don't think there is a Nigerian that will fail to realize that when he was growing up, he saw a tree, and probably he did plant one. Even if he grew up in the middle of Lagos, he would know that it's even indoor plants and things like that. So I think the campaign will do a lot of good. Enforcement will also be part of it. But as I try to challenge people is that why don't you as a person, as part of your responsibility, to plant a tree every year? That way you will know that you have a commitment to pay back what nature has been giving you free of charge. And if you have to cut down a tree, make sure that you have to give us another 2, 3 more that will replace the first one. And there are trees now that grow very fast to maturity. Within 5 years, you'll be able to get some. And then we need to start reducing the usage of firewood for fuel consumption in our homes to cook.
Afford.
Now, I'm not too sure I agree with that, because if you find out the cost of gas, depending on the sizes you're picking, over time, compared to what the firewood will cost, maybe the firewood is probably 200 naira at a particular time, but within 2-3 days it's gone. By the time you buy for 4 weeks, compare that with the gas that you're spending 2,000 naira. The chances are that your gas, will be much cheaper at the end of the day. And of course, we need to improve our habits in terms of how we use water. Sometimes when we boil things, we leave the water to boil until it's either gone, or we start all over again. We're busy doing something else. Or it is hot, but we want to take bath with hot water. Those are things we have to regulate to understand that the aspect of energy usage in the home is also dependent on your ability to prioritize how you effectively place your demands.
That's very true. So finally, before we let you go, does climate change have a lot to do with the amount of flooding being witnessed presently?
Well, I mean, climate change is becoming a little bit controversial. Some don't even believe it exists, like our friend Donald Trump. Some see it, especially those in the economic extreme, believe that it's also a hoax by environmentalists to create concerns. But it's staring us at the face, largely because of the way the rains have changed in terms of intensity, time period, and the devastating effects, and the winds that we start getting. Yes, there is a link between the way we treat our environment and what is happening today. So the whole aspect of the climate change is beginning to hit everybody in the face, and people are realizing, oh, we need to start thinking twice. How do we save this earth? Earth is reacting over the kind of damage we are creating in our construction habits, in our eating habits even, and in the usage of the resources God has given us. And so the expectation that we are going to plant trees to assist us is one of such, but there are other things we also need to look at, which has to do, as I said, with our way of constructing the environment, using the resources, and managing them too. When you were giving the reports on the energy, and I was wondering, isn't it time for us to give little attention to solar, give little attention to other alternative sources of energy, so that we reduce the carbon effects that we're having? And I think that, if we put that together, will help us manage the effects of climate change.
Thank you so much for being on E&E Weekly, Town Planner Archie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that was Town Planner Luther Bulus Archie. He is the former Director, Parks and Recreation, the FCT. And with that, we end today's program. Remember, you can watch this episode and previous episodes of the program on its official YouTube page. Just search for E&E Weekly and then subscribe. Make sure to keep a date with us next week, Tuesday, as we bring you top stories from the energy and environment sector. I am Joycelyn Elakeche Ada. Good afternoon.